because I'm going to refresh people's minds about the documentary, the Al Jazeera documentary, Labour Files, which included this, which I've just edited down a bit.
He's one of those people that just seems to be able to act with impunity, that whatever he does is going to be acceptable to party officials. And you can't help being suspicious, really, about, who's backing him, who's supporting him. How does he manage to continue in the way he does?
After multiple complaints are filed, the Labour Party suspends Stanger. The party sends Stanger a questionnaire inviting him to respond to the allegations. Stanger rejects the accusation that he has broken any of the party's rules or codes of conduct. Metadata in the Labour files reveals that Stanger didn't write the letter himself.
Okay. Okay, so this shows that the author of what I've been looking at by Luke Stanger is another Luke Akehurst.
Luke Akehurst is an influential figure in the Labour Party and now sits on the party's National Executive Committee. He's also a key figure in the pro-Israel lobby, a director of We Believe in Israel.
Oh, my word. So the author of those documents, surprise, surprise, is Luke Akehurst.
Luke Akehurst is known to be the anti-Corbynista of all anti-Corbynistas.
Right now, I'm joined by a motley crew, Greg in Turkey, Asa Winstanley and Becky Massey. Now, I just wanted to update people about this story because we covered it on the Sunday show a couple of weeks ago, but we've actually got some new evidence that has come in, which is actually from none other than Luke Akehurst himself. He says in a tweet replying to Becky, "I wasn't a member of the NEC at the time that I helped Luke Stanger. In any case, his case was determined by the NCC, not the NEC, and we recuse ourselves from any cases we have an interest in. I'm guessing that his legal support may be on a pro bono basis." I'd just like to congratulate Greg and Becky on bringing some kind of comment out from Luke Akehurst. Greg, you're frozen in a kind of in a bad signal there, I can see. So Becky, what have you been doing to get Akehurst to reply? I mean, how did you manage to get that?
Well, it was about 2 a.m. in the morning, Crispin, so maybe he'd had a few drinks, I don't know. But I was pretty quick on the screenshot of his admission of what we saw in the Labour files.
And
he deleted it within 30 seconds.
Oh, did he? Oh, I didn't know that. I thought it was still up there. Oh, right, so he deleted it, but we've got it. That was fantastic to screenshot it like that. Do you think Luke Akehurst is riled by this whole Al Jazeera documentary, or because he seems to be putting tweets out and social media to undermine it, but it seems like he isn't actually that cool about it, is he?
Well, he shouldn't be cool about it. Let's go back to what the Labour files showed. They showed that Luke Stanger was expelled by the Labour Party. And then people, including MPs, including my MP and Luke Stanger's MP, Peter Kyle, and various other MPs, stepped in. Mishcon stepped in with a letter, and Luke Stanger apparently wrote a very eloquent piece in his defence, which, of course, the metadata reveals was written by Luke Akehurst. Now, Luke Akehurst is sitting on the NEC, and he needs to be a bit more honest and a bit more transparent about what he gets up to. Because if you are ghostwriting letters for people who are expelled by the Labour Party because they have made so many abusive tweets and racist comments against the GRT community, the Labour Party was right to expel Luke Stanger. And why somebody like Luke Akehurst, who performs as if butter wouldn't melt in his mouth, seeks to undermine the system by his ghostwriting, he should resign. He was tweeting last night, oh, I must watch this show to see if they decide I should resign. Yes, you should resign, Luke Akehurst, and just get on with the day job of believing in Israel.
That's Steve Walker from Squawkbox. He wanted to come in. You've got something to add to this. Oh, you're zipped. Oh, sorry. There you go.
Hello there. Yes, I mean, there's a weird process going on with this, because I know for sure that this case that was meant to go to the NCC for Luke Stanger never made it to the NCC. So it was on their schedule and then disappeared from their schedule without any explanation. The Al Jazeera Files program said that they could, that Stanger had been expelled. If so, that was done at the NEC level, because the NEC took powers on itself even before Jeremy Corbyn left the party to expel people. So it could well be that they decided to expel him. But as of the beginning of this year, he was still supposedly on his way to the National Constitutional Committee, which was the supreme disciplinary body in the party to decide whether to chuck him out. But it didn't make it to them, and it just disappeared from the schedules. So, and that's straight from kind of party insiders and that. So it's the claim by Mr. Akehurst that the reinstatement was decided by the NCC is manifestly untrue.
Right, now there's been a blog written by Luke Akehurst in the last day to sort of to make it. I don't know why he's writing a blog, and he knows that we're discussing him, so maybe he wants us to have something to discuss. But this is on his blog, Asa. A party transformed: how UK Labour is ripping left anti-Semitism out by its roots. And then this is a paragraph within the blog. In fact, the narrative on some parts of the hard left is degenerating further sharply, no longer claiming only that claims of anti-Semitism are exaggerated, in inverted commas. Some are buying into the narrative of the Al Jazeera documentaries, the lobby and the Labour files, that anti-Semitism has been deliberately weaponized by a conspiracy of the right of the party Israel and Zionists to deny Corbyn the chance to become Prime Minister and to subsequently purge the left. More, that moderate party officials deliberately dragged their feet on tackling anti-Semitism in the 2015 to 2018 period, that there is a hierarchy of racism in the Labour Party, whereby there is an excessive focus on anti-Semitism, while Islamophobia and anti-black racism are ignored. JVL's specific narrative is that anti-Zionist Jews, are being disproportionately targeted by Labour's discipline, and they are therefore the victims of an anti-Semitism that targets Jews whose Jewish identity is lost. Do you think he's actually getting the point now?
You've got to give him credit that at least he's mentioned it.
He seems to have given a pretty good précis of what's going on, doesn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't actually read this article properly yet, but I'll do so after this meeting. But I did notice that this blog post article, whatever it is, was written on Fathom, which is the journal describes itself as the in-house journal of BICOM, an Israel lobby group. So, I mean, I think the in-house journal is a bit of a grand title for a blog, which is mostly, read by its own activists, which, are they don't have that many of them, but nonetheless, they are in influential positions within the Labour Party. It has to be said. So the irony of him criticising the idea that pro-Israel groups are weaponising the accusation of anti-Semitism in BICOM, the Britain-Israel Communications Office, their own in-house journal, is it's more than ironic, to be honest. The interesting thing about Akehurst is that he is the kind of he's one of the more long-standing in-party Israel lobbyists within the Labour Party, who's been in the Labour Party for a long time. I recommend, if you Google Luke Akehurst's name, about the fourth or the fifth result is the Electronic Intifada's tag for Luke Akehurst. So at the website that I mostly write for, the Electronic Intifada, we've got more than a decade's worth of reporting on Luke Akehurst. Like, he's somebody who's got quite a long record of professional lobbying for the Israel lobby. So, like, when we talk about the Israel lobby, it's a generalized title for quite a wide-ranging phenomenon, which ranges from hard right activists like Jonathan Hoffman, who will be familiar to a lot of you, who's this hard right pro-Israel activist who in 2019 was convicted of harassment of a Palestinian protester in London. To including also people like Luke Stanger, who we've mentioned, who of course Becky and Greg will know, has been involved in anti-Palestinian activism on the streets of Brighton. And we saw some of that in the Al Jazeera film, in the Al Jazeera series. To also professional lobbyists, people like Luke Akehurst, whose day job, as Becky said, in a comment which I found quite amusing, but is also very true, that is literally his day job, is believing in Israel. That is the title of his organization, We Believe in Israel, which began as a project of BICOM, the Britain Israel Communications and Research Center, which is runs this website Fathom, which this blog was written on. So the interesting thing about Akehurst is, if you go to that, the Electronic Intifada, our coverage of Luke Akehurst, the oldest article is by my colleague David Cronin, a brilliant Irish journalist based in Brussels. And he has an article from 2011 about Akehurst. Akehurst was recruited into BICOM by Lorna Fitzsimmons, a former Labour Party MP on the right of the Labour Party, who was at that time the chief executive of BICOM. And Akehurst's job before that was at Weber Shandwick, this PR giant, and he was a defense specialist at Weber Shandwick. He then became essentially a spin doctor for the Israel lobby, and that's something he's done ever since. So I don't know. Can I share my screen, Crispin?
No, I can't. You can't do that. But if you could put a link in the chat, that would be good.
Okay, so I'll put a link in the chat of a particular article which people can look at, which I think is really interesting, of an article I wrote in 2019. There's an interesting photo there, which, the point I want to make is Luke Akehurst is not just some freewheeling supporter of Israel within the Labour Party. He is, in effect, and is a cutout for the Israeli government within the Labour Party. You could describe him as an Israeli agent within the Labour Party. And that, I don't think that's any exaggeration to say, because he's quite open about his pro-Israel views. In this article, you'll see a photo of him at a 2019 conference with the former Israeli minister in the Benjamin Netanyahu government, Gilad Erdan, who was the Minister for Strategic Affairs, which was essentially a semi-covert global agency. It was essentially another spy agency for Israel under the guise of an Israeli ministry. It was packed to the rafters with former Israeli spies from Mossad, military intelligence, so forth. In this photo, you'll be able to see you can make out Luke Akehurst standing behind Gilad Erdan at a conference in 2018 called Digital, which was run by the Ministry of Strategic Affairs in Jerusalem. And also you can just about make out at the back Simon Cobbs, who's a Sussex Friends of Israel, the Sussex Friends of Israel activist, who Becky, of course, and other Brighton comrades will be familiar with. And the other people in the photo are all sort of pro-Israel bloggers, activists, and so forth from around the world. So, you know, the Israel lobby doesn't act totally independently. It coordinates its activities with the state of Israel itself. And, you know, there's absolutely every reason to believe that Luke Akehurst, and by extension, Luke Stanger, act very much in coordination with the state of Israel.
Okay.
I'm going to get out of the way now. Now Greg's back on, but I will just point out that, you know, this idea that the right-wing staff has dragged to their feet, as Luke Akehurst put it there, on disciplinary matters, doesn't even scratch the surface, because when some of those right-wing Labour staffers left the party in 2018 after Jenny Formby took over, they shredded thousands of documents relating to anti-Semitism cases to actively prevent the party from being able to deal with them, but leaked them to the media so that the media could, could use those against the party, and the party wouldn't know what it was talking about to be able to counter those accusations. So I've dropped that link in the chat, and now that you've got Greg back and you've got your panel, I'll dip out.
All right. Thank you, Steve.
Take care, Luke.
Now, Greg, how are you? Have you got enough time to say a few words now?
I'll speak even more quickly than I normally do. I think Asa, and I'm sure Becky before, but Asa put his finger on it correctly, that you've got on the one hand Luke Akehurst at the very centre of what we know Luke Akehurst does. And when we have then on the periphery, because Luke Stanger's not a lone wolf. He's a useful idiot who's outlived his usefulness. He says that the Labour family now is embracing him. I don't see any sign of that. What I did see when I saw the documents were 30 plus MPs and councillors and council leaders and friends of Luke Akehurst and Steve Reed, Peter Kyle, etc., going out on a limb to tell lies about Luke Stanger they knew, who was what? A bigger than life character, who was a bit ebullient and sometimes a bit over-enthusiastic. Yeah. And now that Steve's gone, I will just pick up, because I'm not criticising Swatbox.
He's an outlier, isn't he? I mean, Stanger, he's an outlier for them. He does their dirty work for them.
And then when he's found out, and we've found him out and we've proved it, not good enough for the Labour Party, it's good enough for us, he's disowned and distanced. But his case, which I'm interested in this destruction of documents, because Al Jazeera, despite their treasure trove of documents, couldn't find the email that we know exists that says Luke Stanger's case was stalled on Top Watson's desk for 2 years. What I have seen, and they didn't include, is documentation that says that Luke Stanger was expelled by the NCC for more serious reasons than those for which he was suspended, more serious than that. And that Alex Barris Curtis, the Executive Director of Legal Affairs, intervened. And magically, he was unsuspended, back in the fold, and welcomed by the chair of the disputes panel. All the while, MPs, some of them Becky and I are friends with, know them, people in Brighton and Hove who knew of his track record, wrote on House of Commons notepaper character references, which is interesting because those of us who've been through this process many times are constantly told character references irrelevant, behavior in the party activism irrelevant. All the panel decides on is the evidence in front of them. And yet everyone said this larger than life character, who they all know, who somehow manages to travel up and down the country to 60 plus constituencies in a year, whilst has barely worked for 2 months in the last 8 years, Who pays for his accommodation? Who pays for his travel? Who paid for his trip to Israel? Yeah, which, interestingly, and I'm not a psychologist, thank goodness, certainly not Luke Stanger's psychologist or psychiatrist, but something happened when he went offline for 18 months whilst working in Joan Ryan's office as an intern, whilst being in the Houses of Parliament at the height of Jeremy Corbyn's election as leader, and then came back online and almost, well, I've counted it, do a Twitter search for vile anti-Semite, search for rancid anti-Semite mentioned by Luke Stanger. The guy's a genius. He has found hundreds and hundreds of people like that, including me and Becky and our friends and Asia, and I'm sure all of us. He's never found a single racist right-winger anti-Corbyn anti-Semite. Oh no, he's just found people, and the only time I've been accused of anti-Semitism was for saying this: the state of Israel is a racist endeavor and always has been, and that is totally allowed. There's not one rule for them and one rule for us. There's no rules for them, and there's any rule they magic out of thin air for us. And when Luke Akehurst said the day after the Squawk article that Luke Stanger had had his reputation trashed and that this student activist who was going up and down the country was being unfairly suspended, no evidence discussed or anything, he said that the day after Squawk article in November 2018, was it? Yeah. And then 6 months later, it's no surprise he wrote it, no surprise at all. The surprise is that we got proof he wrote it. The surprise is, briefly, he admitted he wrote it. But what else has been going on behind the scenes? We don't know, because we are denied under data protection information subject access requests. We're denied who is our data been shared with, third parties. The ICO knows this, yeah, and do nothing. Yeah.
Right. Look, Becky's put her hand up.
Legal and governance, Alex Barris Curtis knows this, and he should be put on the spot in court or by the ICO for breaking the law in what is a criminal conspiracy against Labour Party members. Luke Stanger is important because we've got him nailed. Yeah, absolutely. We know what he's done. I just looked up a tweet. He tweeted the organisers of Brighton Marathon when I was partaking and saying, how do you allow this anti-Semite in your ranks? You should kick him out the marathon. We know that he sent emails to people not knowing that they were employed by their father-in-law saying, sack this anti-Semite. Oops, it's a family firm. We know teachers in the Northwest who have lost their jobs because of Luke Stanger and the cohort are making up false allegations of anti-Semitism, and there's no due process. Luke Stanger is important because we have the evidence. Not all of it was on Al Jazeera. I saw stuff that would make your hair curl. And I know important people who have got the evidence of what happened. And Luke Akehurst still hasn't replied to my tweet saying, I get this about Labour files and all that, but would you be interested in a suspended member who's put in fear of his life the executive director for legal and government, legal affairs, so that the Metropolitan Police were called in and that the suspended member was then expelled but then allowed back in? We don't know who that person was. We're not allowed to know that. But I think one day we will find out. And I think Luke Akehurst and the MPs who supported Luke Stanger, all that clique who control the Labour Party, they have to be embarrassed by it. That's why they're keeping silent, because any connection between Luke Stanger and Luke Akehurst is dynamite, because we know who Luke Stanger is, we know who Luke Akehurst is, and we know how connected they are.
Right. Well, Becky's got a hand up. I've got to move on in a bit, but what would you like to say, Becky?
Yeah, I just want to say quickly, going back to Akehurst and his blog today, he opens that blog with talking about contemporary left anti-Semitism. Now, I don't know what contemporary left anti-Semitism is. It's clearly something different from anti-Semitism. I'm guessing it means anti-apartheid campaigners. But how Akehurst is trying to frame himself is that we somehow are all conspiracy theorists. Al Jazeera, even though everything they did in those programs was based on Labour Party documents, that is not a conspiracy theory. That is reality. And Luke Akehurst can use any kind of language he wants to try and use to obfuscate what he is and what he does. And what he is and what he does is bad. And he should be exposed. He has been exposed, and now he's trying to fluff over it all. And we heard about the, the process in Ilford. The Labour Party is corrupt at its very core. It's rotten, corrupt, and has some of the dirtiest people in it. And one more thing, Crispin, I found in my sleuthing in the early hours of the morning, is that Jas Afal in Ilford, he actually doesn't follow very many people on Twitter, but he does follow Luke Stanger.